Guts and Grit Podcast. A podcast where we discuss overcoming the odds, resiliency, and never giving up. Join us each week as hosts John Melson, Joy Vatrabek, and Mark Renahan discuss coming back from failure and never quitting. Guts and Grit, it's go time.
Welcome to another edition of Guts and Grit. We are on episode 14. I am, of course, your host, Mark Renahan. This is my co-host, the lovely Joy Vatrabek. And, of course, coming to us from Fort Benning, although he has been bitten by some fire ants, Sergeant Melson. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda couldn't take him out, but fire ants can. Today, we have an incredibly special show. It means a ton to us here at Guts and Grit. As some of you may know, we are real big into remembering September 11th. Yeah. We like to do shows that, point out the things that happened that day. And today we have with us an incredible story. Today we have a gentleman named Paul Veneto with us. Paul is a former flight attendant who now gives back by every year during September 11th. He walks, and I want to repeat that, he walks. This year is from Dulles International Airport all the way to Ground Zero down there at the Pentagon, and he pushes a cart from the plane. We're going to get into all of this, and if you look in the background of Paul right now, you see the actual cart, which got us all excited. But everybody, say hello, a big Guts and Grit welcome to Paul Veneto. Paulie, how are you?
Hi, Paul.
Good, guys. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No, we appreciate you having it. Come on. So, Paulie, we like to just jump right in here at the show. So, I know you were a flight attendant. Maybe we could go back to September 11th, and maybe you could just tell your story as to how you led up to where we are now.
Okay, I was a flight attendant with United Airlines. It was my fifth airline that I went to work for. It's just the way my career ended. I started out with charter airlines. I flew a lot of military contract flights with World Airways. That was the first airline I worked with. I was based out of Wrightstown, New Jersey, and we used to fly a lot of military personnel around the world. And as everybody wants to work for a major airline, and I ended up with a few charters. They bellied up, went bankrupt. I go to the next airline, and eventually in '97, I went to work for United. Got based in Chicago, and I was based here for 6 months, and I transferred to Boston. It was a pretty junior base, so I could hold a good schedule, and all flight attendants have a preference after a while, depending on their airline, where they're based, the type of flying the airline does. But you find your little niche in the industry, and some flight attendants like doing the short flights, like Boston to Chicago and back, and one day they're done. Other flight attendants like doing transcon flying, which I like doing. I go across the country, one shot, 6-7 hours, lay over the West Coast, and then come back, and that's pretty much what I like doing. I came in on September 10th at 8 o'clock off a 767 aircraft. I just came back from Los Angeles. And 8 o'clock, I got off the plane. The next morning, that same aircraft went back out, flight 175 on 9/11, and it hit the second tower. So what happened in my life was I ended up in an opiate addiction after 9/11. I was prescribed pain medication, and I know this today, but I didn't know it then, that I really wasn't functioning or dealing with the emotions of what happened on 9/11. I mean, I was numbed out pretty much, and so as we all know in this country, in the world, really, on what happened that day. When those towers came down, it was such a shock to the whole world and all of us that most people completely forgot about what happened at the beginning of that day, except people like me and some of us. But people didn't realize at the beginning of that day what was going on those aircrafts at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it wasn't a pretty picture. These crew members were up against train terrorism. Without any training at all, none whatsoever. And so for me, it bothered me right away. I mean, 5 days after 9/11, I had a picture. I could, something I can show you real quick.
Love it.
I had this picture right here made. And this is a picture of the crew of 175. That's the captain, the first officer, and the rest of the flight attendants. Amy and Michael were engaged to be married. Amy Jarrett, I flew all the time, was very close. Al was a retired cop. These 3 flight attendants were only flying for 10 months, brand new. So I had this picture made. I had a smaller one made 5 days after 9/11, and I had it attached to my flight bag because I wanted everybody, when I walked to that airport, I wanted everybody to see these faces because I knew that people were going to forget about it. They were, and I wasn't going to let it happen. So unfortunately, I never thought it would come to this, but because every year the anniversary would come up and we'd hear about the firemen, the policemen, and everybody deserved credit that day. Everybody was a hero that day. And people ran into those buildings and never came out to help strangers. There was a lot of heroes that day. But every year on the anniversary, we would never hear about these crew members. And it was tearing me apart. Now I'm in the throes of my addiction. I flew for 10 more years. And I couldn't understand why nobody was recognizing these people. But I told myself a year after 9/11, I remember I was just did a CBS show earlier today on a Zoom thing, and I was explaining this. And I remember a year ago, I remember looking at a beverage cart in a galley on an airplane. I was working a flight, and the thought came to me. This was a year after 9/11. I said, that's what I'm going to do. That's when I knew I was going to do it. I said, I'm going to push one of these things all over to New York from Boston. That'll get everybody's attention. So as we know today, that's what I ended up doing 20 years later, on the 20th anniversary. So what I did is once I was able to put the opiates down in 2015, I started training. I shouldn't say I started training, but it took me from 2015 to really 2020 to come out of the fog of what that opiates did to me. I mean, I was, it took me a while to recover from that, to get back in society. So, I mean, I never planned on doing it on the 20th anniversary. It's just, I knew at that point I was healthy enough mentally, physically, that I could probably pull this thing off. And I said, why not? I'm going to do it. And sure enough, I mentioned it to a few people, and it was put together well, and all I had to do was train. So that's what I did. I ended up getting the beverage cart. That's one of them right there. I ended up getting 2 of them, and I trained. I started October 10th. I'll never forget the date because that's my parents' wedding anniversary and my older brother Peter's birthday. And I drove down to a beach in Quincy, Wollaston Beach, at nighttime, and I got out of my car, and I said, I got to start training. And I didn't have the beverage cart at this time. I just knew I had to start walking. And I remember looking across the beach and seeing the skyline of Boston. And I get out of my car and I look and I said, holy shit, what am I doing? I said, look how far Boston is. And I'm going to try to go to New York. That was the first day. That's the first thing that came out of my mind. And I was smoking cigarettes at the time.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, yeah. So I get out of my car and I got a cigarette in my mouth. And I don't even think I walked a half a mile. And I'm like, oh, my God, how am I going to do this? And I didn't, I had a drive in me like I've never experienced in my life. So I knew that it's funny because the plan was I didn't write anything down, but I had it I don't know how to explain it. I knew that if I walked so many months, build up, and eventually, after a couple of months, then eventually I'll bring the beverage cart out, and then in a park, and a couple of months in the park, and then I'll bring it out onto the street. That's pretty much how, it's exactly how it played out. When I got to March 1st, that's when I quit the cigarettes, and I brought the beverage cart out. And I started in the park for 2 months in the beverage cart. I got up to 10 miles, and then I knew I needed to get on the street and get used to the environment, the cars, the buses, the railroad tracks, and sidewalk grates, whatever I was going to run into. And then I just trained from May 1st to August 1st. I left August 21st out of Boston.
Wow.
And the first day out of Boston, was a hurricane. They didn't think I'd do 5 miles. I did 18. A week later, I'm in Connecticut. I get another hurricane. The story was just amazing. It was just unbelievable. But,
I would say that's some resilience, Neymar.
Yeah, that's using guts and grit.
Yes,
Now,
good.
Paul, you brought up something that I want to, and I have to apologize because I never realized this in my own head, but you're very much right that every year on September 11th, very few people remember the flight attendants who were on those crews who gave their lives, myself included, to be perfectly honest with you. Now, I was looking into, we like to do shows for September 11th, and when I came across you and I saw your story, I said to myself, you know what? We've had cops, we've had firemen, military guys like John who dealt with the aftermath, but those flight attendants, they're as much of heroes as anybody that day. I mean, you want to talk about being on the front line of September 11th, it was them. And it's awesome that you are doing this. I just want to point that out. And congratulations on getting sober and quitting butts. I heard quitting cigarettes is probably harder than all of them from what I hear. But so let me get back to this, Paulie. So this year you're going from Dulles Airport to the Pentagon crash site. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How far is that?
That's nothing. I can do it blindfolded. Last year was 220 miles. This is only 35 miles.
Wow.
Oh, okay. But it's still, it's still an incredibly important thing to do, in my opinion.
It's you know what? It's not that. It was never. I'm not doing this to prove I'm an athlete because that's not what it's about. It's not anything to do with that at all. And to be honest with you, I'm baffled I even did it because I've driven to New York since, and I can't even believe I did it. Now that I did it, but because the hills in Connecticut were brutal. You know what I mean? But when I was doing it, I didn't notice it. I just flew right through it. But I know that the plan is for next year is Shanksville. That's 300 miles. And that all depends on if I get corporate sponsors. I'm a nonprofit now. I incorporated Paulies Push. So it's, a gentleman donated an RV to me. It was, so many things have happened that I know I was supposed to do this. I could take all day long because every day, the minute we finish with this, when I walk outside, I guarantee you something's going to happen to me today. And I'm going to say, oh my God, I can't believe it. Because has not stopped. And the phone calls, the emails, the people that come into my life, this whole thing, I didn't think I was going to do this again. I had no intentions of it. How do you recreate the 20th anniversary? You know what I mean? I accomplished my mission. I got these guys recognized. I got worldwide attention. I never expected it, but I accomplished it. Before I even got to ground zero, I felt like I accomplished it. So I didn't need to do this again. But what's happened is I got so much response from all over the world, people from Brazil, from Australia. I mean, it's just crazy emails thanking me and saying I inspired them. And the guy gives me an RV, says, just take this thing and keep doing what you're doing. So, and now I got to tell you, there's so many things that happen along the way. The story was just amazing. It was just, the whole thing was so amazing. On top of the beverage cart, we had a GPS unit with a camera on it. The guy who designed it was he's a race director. Dave McGilvery, who's the race director of the Boston Marathon, gave me this guy's number. He's from upstate New York. Says he can map the route out for you. So when I called him, he goes, it's funny, I'm designing this camera to put on the back of a bicycle. And that might work with what you're doing. So he brought it with him and he showed me this contraption. He goes, well, attach it on top of your beverage cart. Well, sure enough, he goes, I'll come and I'll spend 2 days with you guys when you start out to make sure you know how to run it. After the second day, he said, there's no way I will leave. There's no way I'm going to miss this because all of a sudden, we couldn't believe what was happening on the streets. The people, the signs, the kids, and the fire trucks and the policemen. None of this was planned. It was just, I get emotional thinking about it because I'm thinking about so many stories that were told to me along the way. From Massachusetts into Connecticut, each day, people coming out of their houses and they were divulging personal stuff to me. Like I was speechless over what I was hearing. I couldn't believe it. I started to realize that it was more than I thought I was doing this to recognize these crew members. That was it. I didn't, if Nike came up to me and said, I'll give you $1 million to put Nike sticker on the beverage cart, I would have told them to screw, because it wasn't about money. I wasn't doing this for money. I needed these guys recognized. And I still feel that way today. That's what it's about. But what happened was there was so much happened out there that I realized that this is more than just recognizing these guys. What is happening? These people are talking to each other, neighbors that haven't talked to each other in 5 years. One they'd be standing there waiting for me. I'd come up and one would walk away and the other one would say, I haven't talked to him in 5 years. And the light went on in my head. I said, oh my God, there's more to this pushing this cart than I could even imagine. But one thing that really stuck out, a few things, but when I was in the middle of the street, I had 2 firemen on one side of me, one on this side, a fire truck in front of me, a couple of fire trucks in front of me, police cars, all escorting me through these towns all the way to New York. It was crazy. But one of the firemen starts crying beside me, puts his arm on my shoulder and leans in, crying in the middle of the street, and whispers in my ear, says, I can't talk to my guys in the firehouse. I'm struggling with drugs. I couldn't believe it, in the middle of the street. Half hour later, I'm pushing, and a Vietnam vet comes walking out in the middle of the street and says, I just want to thank you. And he walks away, and the news cameras start coming towards me. And right away, in my mind, I'm there. They should be walking right past me and following that guy. Why are these cameramen talking to me? Talk to him. And that happened more than once to me. I'll let you see that. I get emotional because I'm reliving that moment when that happened on the middle of that street. I'm thinking, this is the guy you should be talking to. And so, when that was going on, I had no intent thinking that I was going to be continuing this year or anything. But in my mind, I'm thinking, if I ever have the opportunity to recognize that guy, I'm going to do it. And look what's happened. Now, all of a sudden, I finished the whole thing last year. A guy gives me an RV. I'm not under somebody else's umbrella of their nonprofit. I incorporate on my own nonprofit, and my best friend is Joe Sweeney, whose father dropped the second bomb in World War II. Now, I need a connection to go into the Pentagon. I'm not going to let some guy roll a beverage cart into the Pentagon. So, of course, I called Joe up, and he goes, call my sister. She's a retired 33-year military, worked at the Pentagon. She was there on 9/11 and lost friends. His sister, Elizabeth. So I called her. She was ecstatic. So she was the connection, and whatever she had to do, go up the chain of command in the military to get this thing approved. So it's all come together. So now, guess what? All those times on that street with those Vietnam vets. So now I got involved with Operation Homefront. A guy from Milton, Joe O'Hara, that's a national corporation. They help the military families. So now I can raise money and give money to these military families. Exactly. So that's what I mean. Is I don't know what's going to happen when I walk out this door today, but I'm telling you right now, it just doesn't stop.
Paulie, I got a secret for you. So you want to know how I found you? Joe O'Hara was a guest on my show a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me all that Operation Homefront was doing, and he mentioned you. I said, that Veneto, the last name sounds familiar. See, a Milton guy? I said, yeah. I said, we got to get Paulie on the show with John. Yeah. He was perfect. So, Johnny, you got any comments on this one?
Man, it's such a great story, right? Paulie, man, I got chills up my arms right now, right? Is the idea that you're out there and you're giving back to the people around you, right? And your devotion and commitment to make sure that those people are never forgotten, right? Getting out there and being seen and don't forget about these people, and reminding people of that day, even though it was a bad thing, you've twisted it into a good thing, right? And it's branched off. Look at all that, you talked about the experience of all, what a positive impact just for you being out there, being that centrifugal force, right? Of going out there doing something positive, how much it drew more positivity towards you, and it's helping other people. People are seeing that, and it's that's what we need. We need more of that right now, Paulie. And I appreciate all your hard work and the recognition you're providing those people.
Absolutely.
It's an amazing. Paulie, I got another question for you. So, after September 11th, you were still a flight attendant?
I flew
Was
for
it
10 more years.
how was it flying right after it happened? Like when you first went back to work, was that just incredibly anxiety, stress? I mean, I don't even know how you would answer it, but was it crazy as I'm thinking?
I can tell you my own personal thing, as people knew me because of that picture on my bag. But every time I went to work, I was waiting for it to happen again, and I wanted it to happen.
Yeah.
I can only tell you, I wanted revenge like I've never. I wanted payback, but I couldn't show that on the airplane. I had to, you know what I mean? But I was coming apart at the seams. I mean, you couldn't drop a pin on an airplane without me knowing about it. Anything that moved on an airplane that I was on, I knew. I was like a cat. But it didn't show. Nobody got behind my back. I don't know how I lasted 10 years. I really don't. When I think back of what it was, I don't know how I held it together, because, us in Boston, with the 2 aircrafts left out of, because we were so close to it. When you go to another city, and the caterers would come on the plane and would look at them like, nobody's checking this stuff? I mean, it was crazy. Only people on the West Coast, they weren't affected like we were. And for me, it bothered me. I'm like, I'm not getting, either you check this, a lot of stuff was, because they didn't have any answers right away. So yeah, it was brutal. Mm-hmm. It was brutal for the, right away. It was tough to go back to work. At United, we had 28,000 flight attendants when 9/11 happened. After 9/11, we went down to 16,000.
Wow.
So
Wow.
They laid off or quit, and I didn't blame them. If I was a woman after 9/11, there's no way I'd go back on an airplane, because we were finding box cutters under seat cushions. That, from what we understand, they were riding our planes watching us for a while. You know what I mean? So.
Wow, that's stuff you don't hear about at all.
There's a lot of stuff that, all of a sudden they started arming the pilots, had the option to carry guns, and they'll put the air marshals on. We would hear different stuff, and, it was just, everything changed. It was a fun job. I loved the job. I would have done that job for nothing. I really would have. I loved it. I traveled. Why not? I mean, it was beautiful. I traveled around the world. And, I'm single. I don't have any kids. I was a playboy back in the day. It was beautiful.
Paulie, I was going to say, when I look at you, I don't think flight attendant. No. I think Teamsters. So I will say you are not the average-looking flight attendant. Just for that.
They said that most people said when you're from Boston, you're either a gangster or you're a cop. You know what I mean?
Or a podcast host or in the military, but those things too. Paulie, your story is amazing. When do you leave to head down to Dulles and get this show on the road?
So I'll tell you, another thing about it is, too, is American Airlines, the airline industry don't want anything to do with 9/11. Us in the airlines know that, because they just don't, it's bad for business. They don't want to be associated with 9/11. We tried doing memorials through the years, and always, no. 9/11 Fund in Boston, they just had me come in, and they did a video that's going to be shown, streaming on September 11th at City State House for the families of 9/11. This year, they're dedicating it, the 9/11, this year, dedicated it to the crew members. Isn't that funny?
Wow.
For 20 years, I was going in there asking them to get involved. Now all of a sudden, whatever. You know what it is? It makes me feel good because I made some changes, and that's the important thing. But now the airlines, American, is letting me leave from Dulles Airport out of the crew room at American's crew room, and then they're bringing me out on the tarmac. And the fire trucks are going to be out and spray the water. They asked me the other day, "You okay getting wet?" And I said, "Listen, I've been through 2 hurricanes last year." So, people are really excited about it. I leave September 8th out of Dulles. I'll push the 8th, the 9th, the 10th, and hopefully have it all done. And just make it easy. I come into the Pentagon at 2:00, and that's when they're going to bring me in there. So
that's amazing.
So yeah, like last year, I wore these wristbands for $175, and now I got these for American 77. I don't know if you can see them.
I know we can see him, Paulie. And
We see it, Paulie.
Yep.
Paul, I just want to let you know that what you're doing is unbelievable.
It is.
Seriously. I'm sure people have told you, but from a couple of old Boston guys in their Pennsylvania/Florida co-hosts, we wanted to let you know that. And I know everybody up there is super proud of you, Paulie. What you're doing is unbelievable.
I appreciate it.
It gives me goosebumps too, and it's not the AC in here. I promise you that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's an unbelievable story. So, Paulie, we're getting to the end of our show, but we want to thank you for coming on, number one. Number two, thank you so much for pointing out to me. I never realized about the flight attendants.
I didn't either.
Every year, I always think, we had Detective Jerry Kane from the NYPD on. We had Sean Pierce, who was on the 73rd floor, one of the towers, but we never discussed the flight attendants. I think that's been skipped over the years.
Or what they did, had to go through.
Exactly, what they went through that year. And I want to thank you more than I can say for coming on the show. And on a serious note, congrats on beating the addiction. As a fellow Bostonian, I've seen what it's done to our communities up there. So congrats on that.
So I just know that every one of us have been on an airplane. And just picture yourself all the times you've been on an airplane. And just picture at 8 o'clock in the morning and that stuff happening. How these flight crews ever stood up against that without any type of training, with people screaming and whatever. It's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
As Americans, we're supposed to recognize someone like that. That's just mind-boggling to go up against that. It's, some of these girls that I knew, they get kids at home and whatever, and it's just amazing. So,
we have John, Paulie. John does that for us. That's who goes up against those guys, is John there on the Zoom next year. He trains for that stuff, but
as long as the ants don't get him.
Yeah, unless you're a fire ant, in which case you can take John out. But no, I mean that's what you're saying is like, I think of that now that you're pointing out. Like, Paulie, did you ever, prior to September 11th, all your years as a flight attendant, you never probably thought something like that could happen, did you? Did you ever think of that, or did you, were you ever concerned about that when you were working?
Well, of course, you thought about being hijacked because you trained for but not to be the aircraft the cockpit to be taken over. That was never. No, absolutely not. No, I mean I've been on flights where there were fights. I mean I worked for some charter airlines out of Boston where it was $99, and believe me, they were throwing beer bottles at each other. I used to like those flights because I'd be in the middle of it.
I'm shocked that people leaving Boston would be drinking and fighting, Paulie. That's a shock to me.
No.
So, all right. So, Paulie, if people want to get involved with Paulies Push, www.pauliespush.com is where I would send them.
Yep.
And that's
PAULIES. PauliesPush.com. Yeah.
And on there, they can go, they can donate, and they can cheer you on and all things like that.
Yeah, they'll be able to sign on to a GPS unit, and it'll send a signal to your phone the minute we turn it on, and you can literally find out where I'm at exactly on the street. I had people coming off the highways off of 95 last year. They would follow me on their phone. So yeah, it's a pretty good setup. The donations, if you go on the website, it explains everything, and like last year where the money went, I helped build children's YMCA playgrounds and stuff like that. So it's not about money. This thing was never about money. It will never be about money, but it takes money to accomplish it. So whatever's after expenses, it goes to help kids and families and whatever. That's all.
It's fantastic, Paulie. It's fantastic. And, for anybody who's watching, again, that's www.pauliespush.com. Maybe it could be a big company. You might want to sponsor Paulie next year. Don't forget about that. Johnny, before we go, you want to say a few words and take us out?
Sure. I've got a couple of things to say to Paulie and Mark. I'd like to get you and Joyce if we could make this happen. But, Paulie, when you step off, it'd be great if we could get a quick video clip, maybe get a recording of him stepping off, and then when he finishes up, and we could have it, an update put on the show, just a quick clip showing Paulie getting after it. This is a great cause, Paulie, and again, I'm pumped that you came onto the show to talk about it and bring more exposure to your effort. That's an awesome thing that you do, and Paulie, the fact that you had to get through some of your own demons in this process. Right. That's super commendable, man. And it I've watched family members struggle with those same types of addictions, and Mark's talked about his thing as well. And man, it's great that you found it deep down inside. You had some guts and grit to go ahead and push through and make that change for yourself. But in the process, you were giving back to everybody else. So I got to say again, man, that process of giving back to everybody else is awesome. And look what it's done for you, and so I'm big on, one of my things is big on changing and improving myself, right? With working out and making the bad guys work for it if they're going to try and kill me, right? So the thing I always put out at the end of the show is, I'm out there training, right? And I train to be hard to kill. So when you're out there doing your thing, as those flight attendants are out there, they didn't go out willingly. They put up a fight. We all know that. So I tell everybody out there, when you're training, train to be hard to kill.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Paulie, once again, everybody,
Thank you.
www.Paulies Push. Paulie, thank you so much for coming on the show, telling us all about it. And when John and I are home at Christmas time in Boston, we're going to find you for a ginger ale some night down the post. Everybody, thanks a lot for tuning in to Guts and Grit. You can check us out on YouTube, Facebook, all the different social media platforms. Once again, Paul Veneto from Paulies Push here for our first September 11th show. Never forget September 11th, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in to Guts and Grit. Paulie, thank you so much, brother. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Paulie.
Okay, guys.
I'll see you guys.
Talk to you soon,
Bye-bye,
Paulie.
Paulie.
All right.
Guts and Grit. Like, subscribe, comment, share.